I'm used to being nervous about giving a talk, but I've just been overrun by sitting there staring at those stairs and hoping that I can get up here without falling on my face. So that's taken over the talk nerves. So if you're ever nervous about giving a talk, get on crutches and that might pass. Alrighty. Do I need to get that going? There we go. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming to the session. My name is Joyce. I'm a daughter, a wife, a sister, a mother, an auntie, and I consider myself a biographer for Mother Earth. So I tell stories of her ecosystems and how they change over time. And I use drones and satellites as my illustrators. I'm an academic at James Cook University. I teach Earth observation, spatial analysis, and I love absolutely everything about what I do, and I am on a mission to help more people understand more about Earth by viewing her from above. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about resilience. I'm not a marine biologist, a marine scientist, and there's many of you, I assume, that know much more in this space than I do, but I also have a past life in disaster management. And I am really interested in the space of resilience and how we look at it in other parts of our lives as well. And so if we think about the reef, same as whether it's a flood or any other disaster that we come across, when we're thinking about resilience, it's being able to withstand or recover from difficulties. And for Cairns, the cyclone, over just around Christmas time, Cyclone Jasper, this was Palm Cove, this is what it looked like, and really looking through the process of what happens in terms of being able to strike the balance between reducing risk of a particular event and enhancing the resilience of the local community. And so what I like to do, I'm really a framework person, so I really like looking at what frameworks already exist in different parts of our lives and how we can actually apply them to other areas as well. So what I've done is to take the disaster management cycle, which is a framework of how we provide support in disaster management, and then have a think about how that can actually apply within reef resilience. So there's 4 phases of the disaster management cycle. We've got reduction, readiness, response, and recovery. So briefly what that means is reduction, we're always talking about how do we prevent the next flood or cyclone? What do we do when we know that it's coming, right? In the 2 days or so prior to Jasper, what did we get out and do, and how do we build resilience in the community based on what we do there? What happens in the actual event? What do we do to get out, deploy aid? And then really critically, what are the interventions that we've done and how do we monitor the recovery of that? So what I'd like to do, and I'm going to need a bit of help here, because what I'd like to do is actually to apply that to, it's been so much about COTS, for this symposium, what I'd like to do is to apply the disaster management framework to an outbreak of COTS, and hopefully you can help me with it. So if we think about reduction in terms of a COTS outbreak, what are some of the activities that go on, assuming that there are some activities that go on that help prevent an outbreak? Can anyone give me an idea of something? And you may have to yell given the size of the room. Is there anything that we actually do to prevent the outbreak of COTS? We do nothing. We just sit there and wait. I don't know, I thought in the plenary this morning, I can't remember the speaker's name, but he was talking about looking at the management across broad scale and making sure you keep numbers to a relatively low level before it reaches outbreak, right? Is that something that happens? I'm no COTS person, right? So maybe not so much. Yeah. Maybe that's, yeah? Okay, and then when we realise, wow, we're actually at the breaking point, this is about to hit an outbreak here, what can we do to reduce the impact? Is there something that we can do in the ecosystem, or is it actually just need to get out there and kill as many of them as possible? I don't know. Can anyone think of anything that we do at that point, that inflection point where it's, there's kind of stasis in the community, and then bang, it's going to hit outbreak? Any ideas of things that happen there? Maybe there's space for something there. I don't know. In response, we absolutely know what happens in response, right? There's an outbreak, teams will go out they go with their injection stuff, And this is also, when we think about disaster management, this is also the part of the cycle that we're really, really well aware of. That's what we see on the news. We get the SES out, the police out, all that sort of stuff. That's the sexy stuff, I guess, if you like, of disaster management, but it's only one part of the cycle. And then the final part is looking at how do we support those communities, in this case, how do we support the reef to recover once an outbreak has occurred? What are the types of things that we do? Maybe it's replanting some corals, maybe it's doing something so that the cots can't back or something like that. So that's how we can look at applying the disaster management cycle into the reef resilience space. But one of the key things I think for management is how do we know that we're successful in any of the interventions that we put in place? What's critical? Excellent, thank you so much. So, to manage, we must monitor. I did not plant that one. To monitor, we have to measure. And to measure, we must map. Because we're talking about spatially explicit observations here. We need to know where things are, we need to create maps. And maps are just visualizations of data, right? So let's go back to our cycle. We're talking about getting baseline data first. Before something happens, how do we get information from a location? When we know that something is close to happening, maybe it's bleaching, how do we get out and get as much information as we possibly can so that we can understand how we're managing it later? When it's under attack, what do we do? How do we get data? We could be talking maps, we could be talking about all sorts of things, but what data we get at the point where we're having the crisis? And then how do we evaluate the effectiveness? For my next few slides, I want to give you some case studies of how we do just this in the realm of drone mapping. So I'm going to take you up and down the Great Barrier Reef, range of different spots we see here on the yellow dots, and talk about some studies. All right, so first of all, from Heron Reef, drone data. We can look at individual coral colonies. We can use AI to detect where those colonies are. We can count them, we know the area of them, we know how much live coral there is. Hastings Reef, just off Cairns here. We've got beautiful, beautiful data sets where we can look at sea stars, sea cucumbers, clams, all the coral, whatever it is that you like. We've got that information. We've been counting sea cucumbers from a whole range of these reefs, and the yellow dots that you see are all the sea cucumbers on this reef. You'll also notice that the drone data doesn't cover the entire reef, right? So you can't get everything, but it's a scale step from your in-water stuff to your satellite. There's also some turtles and clams that are counted there as well. Speaking of clams, Orpheus, the clam garden, for anyone that's been to Pioneer Bay where there's the JCU research station, it's amazing, the clams are super cool. Again, developing algorithms to detect the clams, map them. Then picking up those algorithms, tweaking them to count seabirds on Michaelmas Cay. 17,000 seabirds. And there's no way you want to go individually picking them. So this is why we use artificial intelligence. And then we can look over time. So this is not dodgy data. This is a cay just off Townsville that moves, which is super cool and totally unbelievable, but absolutely believable. So we are looking here at a shift of about 40 metres over a 6-week period. We can also look at the volume of change as well. So speaking of volume, Low Isles, just north of here, looking at the change in the sediment and the geomorphology of the reef using 3-dimensional models, all captured and processed with drone data. And this is pre and post Cyclone Jasper. But it could also be a seasonal thing because we've got June to January the following year as well. We can subtract those data sets from each other to be able to see what is the volume change, where have we increased in sand, where have we got deposition, where have we got erosion. And then using these as data sheets, which is work that we've been doing with Parks and Wildlife, to have a whole series of data sheets about individual cays of the Great Barrier Reef. And this is all about capturing that baseline data so that maybe nothing has happened, and that's okay, because we need that baseline data so that when something does happen, we're able to do the change detection and actually understand how much coral did we have, how many sea cucumbers, sea stars, whatever it is that you like, and what happens when it changes. So this is lizard, and this is drone data captured by Jez Roth, who's somewhere around here this week as well. And fresh out there, it's pretty, but it's not pretty, right? But I think, like with disaster management, any of this drone mapping stuff that I've shown you, you can't do it alone. Like, I'm kind of tiny out there on Heron, right? And so that's where it becomes really, really important to build the collaborations and work with people from everywhere to get these types of data that we can use to underpin our management decisions. So we've started building a repository where people can not only process, store, and manage their drone data, but then have the ability to share it as well. And these are all the drone data sets that we have just of the Great Barrier Reef. We have, from 75 countries, data sets everywhere, but just of the Great Barrier Reef, and you can see the number of organisations that are already contributing their data that's available there as well. Look at every single one of those data sets and analyse those data sets for what's there, the different habitat types. So from rain all the way up the top, you can see all the yellow dots there. They're all areas where we've analysed drone data. And on the right side, the inset of Rain Island, you can see different coloured dots. They're different types of habitats, both underwater and on land as well. So we have all that data that we then use to train models so that the next time drone data comes in, we can then start to do that automatically. So I'd just like to finish with a quote from Sir David Attenborough, which I think is really, really important here when we look at resilience and we look at being able to transfer some of this knowledge that we have, but we can't do it alone. So if working apart, we're a force powerful enough to destabilise a planet, surely working together, we're a force powerful enough to save it. Thank you.
Thanks for that fantastic talk and those beautiful pictures. Does anyone have a question for Karen?
Everyone wants afternoon tea?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you mind coming up the front? So sorry, just for the microphone for those people who are watching online.
Hello. I'm super fan of the GeoNadir. I wanted to know these posters. Do you do the analysis? The software does the analysis? Or it has to be the individual to do the analysis and do our own posters? Because sometimes what happens is that we have all this vision, but sometimes we need that pipeline, that we can insert the data or, and then get that poster that is ready to send a message, right?
Yeah, cool. So you mean the black posters that I showed?
The poster that had different characteristics, geomorphology, is something that is you can get that from the software.
No. So that's a little bit of a red herring. A lot of the data on those information sheets, we've actually been looking at extracting from satellite information. So those information sheets of the priority Ks that Parks and Wildlife have given to us, we've looked at a whole range of different data sets that are available. We're looking at coastal change, and then we pull that together with all of that information. So it's not something that's pulled directly from drone data. It's a range of things. There's some drone data there, but there's a lot of things about wave climate, geomorphology, and a big range of that as well. Yeah. And so that should be done. That's wrapping up soon. That's one of the GBRF funded projects that there should be 40 of those different coral Ks that will be covered under that, and that should be publicly available as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.